Hi everybody, and welcome back to another edition of Beyond the Cage right here on MMA World and MMA UK. Thanks to everybody for tuning in once again this week. On this week's show, we are going to break down UFC St. Louis from this past weekend in Missouri, break down the four main fight cards that happened on Fox Sports 1. Then we're going to get into Bellator 192, preview the return of Bellator MMA for 2018 and also their debut on the brand new Paramount Network here in the United States, which changed from their former home for the last several years in Spike TV. And then, of course, we're going to end the show with our preview and picks for the main card for UFC 220 going down this Saturday from Boston, Massachusetts at the TD Garden Arena, featuring the main event for the heavyweight championship of the UFC, Stipe Miocic against Francis Ngannou, and also the highly touted co-main event for the light heavyweight championship between Daniel Cormier and Volkan Ozdemir. Once again, I'm your host, Jim Graham. You can follow me on Twitter at Jim Graham. You can also follow, obviously, MMA World right here on the page. Thanks again for joining us this week. Like the page, and you can also follow MMA World on Instagram and Twitter as well. And, of course, our sister site, MMA UK, like our socials there, Facebook and Twitter and Instagram for MMA UK as well. So joining me on the program this week will be Ryan Cambridge. He's going to be joining me here in just a minute. And he's going to be filling in for my normal co-host, Caleb Beatty, who is actually covering Bellator 192 this weekend for MMA UK and MMA World. She's from the Los Angeles area, so she's right there to cover it. I believe yesterday she was covering the I think open workouts, as well as there was some media scrum. I think there's another press conference today for the event. Obviously Friday will be the weigh-ins, and obviously she'll be there Saturday for the fight as well. So we're going to have all Bellator all covered from the fabulous forum there, the debut of Bellator MMA in 2018, as well as their debut on the Paramount Network, and also the debut of their heavyweight Grand Prix tournament that will kick off the first round, or the first fight of the first round of that huge tournament that they are running there. And also, our friend that works with us at MMA World and MMA UK, Miles Painter, will also be joining us, holding down the comments section for us as well. Shout out to Miles, helping out the show, as well as writing some previews for the show. If you haven't seen him, he did some excellent work previewing Henry Corrales coming up fighting on the main card of Bellator 192. That's on MMA UK, as well as previewing, I believe, Gregor Gillespie coming up as well for the UFC fights. So, yeah, excited to have that, excited to go here. Waiting to get Ryan on the broadcast here to bring him on. But before we bring him on, I'll talk a little bit about some of the headlines that have happened in the past few days for the world of mixed martial arts. And of course, if you have any comments or questions or concerns, please comment down below. I'll get to them as the show goes along here in the next hour or so. And one of the things that I kind of wanted to talk about, at least briefly, some of you may have seen it, I believe we reported on here in MMA UK, was the Gender Wars man versus woman contest pay-per-view thing that happened a few days ago. I think it happened on their the 12th. Yeah, so about a week ago. And supposedly it took place in Russia. That was all the promotion that was going on. And that's what they were saying. And it was going to be broadcast live there and all this stuff. And then it's kind of leaked out. I'm not sure who leaked it. I don't know if the fighters straight up did it. That it actually took place in some like abandoned warehouse in the middle of nowhere in Minnesota here in the United States. Now, last time I checked, Minnesota does have a governing body for combat sports, and 100% they would not allow something like this to take place had obviously this organization putting this on had went through the correct and proper channels to actually put on a mixed martial arts event in any capacity in their state. So not only that, I think there was a problem with actually the pay-per-view stream. I think that people were promised 3 fights for $10 or whatever the heck it was, and something happened, they didn't get it. So you add in that with it not even being like a sanctioned thing. It was already pretty sketchy from the start, but I just find it so interesting that they did all this thing to say it was in Russia, and then it ends up being at like a warehouse in Minnesota. I get what they were trying to do. They were trying to draw some shock and awe, trying to make a few bucks and hoping people would maybe pay that 10 or 15 or $12.95 or whatever the case was to see a couple of fights. But now, with it coming out that it was in Minnesota, you got to believe that there's going to be some type of lawsuit or sanctions or fines coming whoever set this thing up. And I don't know what their take was from the pay-per-view, especially if they're going to end up having to offer refunds to people. And you add in that with all these possible fines and sanctions, they're going to probably end up losing money. And it kind of makes you wonder, what really was this promoter's endgame here? Because he's promoting it to be in Russia, he's having guys versus girls, and he's charging a pay-per-view price, and because it actually wasn't in Russia, there couldn't have been a crowd, so it's not like he was selling tickets to this event, and he had to pay the fighters something, because obviously with it being unsanctioned in America, I highly doubt there was the proper referees or medical crews and testing and all that stuff that you normally need to run a fight in pretty much any state or territory within the United States. So it really makes me think, what was the end game here? I don't get it. Because he's gonna lose money. It's gonna happen. If he didn't already lose money just based on the bottom line of the buys versus what he had to spend to do all this and promotion, then when the fines and stuff do come and legal fees and stuff, what did he really gain? Nothing. He didn't gain. He pretty much ruined his career as a promoter. No one's going to take this guy seriously. Everyone knows that this guy's shady. No one's going to want to work for this guy. He's probably not going to be able to get a promoter's license again in any state in the country, and most likely Canada. You could probably get in some other countries that are running, or you could probably run. If he actually did run it in Russia, then yeah. But I don't get all the secrecy and hoopla and why he even really put this on. Because most reasons you put stuff on is to make money. And it just doesn't seem like he was going to make any money in this endeavor. So I think it was kind of a waste of everyone's time, even the fighters involved. They must have really needed the money to compete on something like this, because you could just tell right from the beginning that this was something that was not on the up and up. And hopefully none of you out there watching bought this or bought into this. And maybe if you did, maybe it was because you wanted to see a train wreck, and if that's your thing, then I hope you got your $12 worth. But realistically, I don't even think it was worth $1. I don't think it was worth any of anyone's hard-earned money or time to sit and watch that event. Now, I just had to bring it up because it's just been racking my brain this past week that this even went on. Something like this went on. And another thing, did the guy think it was not going to get out? Did he really think something that at this level of shadiness that nobody would say anything? They'd be like, yeah, it was actually Minnesota, it wasn't Russia. Did he really think nobody was going to say anything? I mean, the fact it was non-sanctioned, you're already doing something illegal. I don't know if you really have that much. I don't know who would be signing a non-disclosure agreement to do that. I don't know if non-disclosure agreements work on an illegal activity. I'm not a lawyer. I don't know. I don't think it works that way. I think it has to be something that was actually a activity that you're not just you can't discuss there as a result of something legal, not because it was something illegal. So, man, it's just a complete mess. So, all right, it looks like Ryan is having some trouble connecting here, so I'm going to continue and roll right along here and get to UFC St. Louis. That went down this past Sunday evening, obviously in St. Louis, Missouri. The main card was shown on Fox Sports 1 here in the United States. And of course, even before this event started, this is something that happened after Kayla and I previewed the event last week. 2 fights ended up getting canceling just a day and 2 days before it actually took place. Starting first was Zach Cummings taking on Thiago Alves. Talk about a fluke or crazy scenario. He's getting out of the bathtub in his hotel, slips, cracks his head on the railing, his skull is now fractured, and can't be cleared to fight. Insane. That's like a once in a million chance of something like that happening. And then it was one thing to slip out of the bathtub. I mean, that kind of happens. But to then fall and then crack your head and crack it enough to have it fracture your skull that you can't compete is insane. It's such bad luck. And I've interviewed Zach Cummings before. He's a really awesome dude. Obviously, he was going to fight in his home state again. Not too far from his backyard there at Glory MMA and Fitness in Lee Summons, Missouri. And just, man, that has to be, obviously Thiago Alves too, but it had to be so frustrating for Zach. Just something as minute as, giving a little slip there in the bathtub, and then boom, you're done. All that 6 to 8 weeks of training out the window. And man, that's just, it's just unfortunate for Zach. Obviously unfortunate for Thiago too, but now he has to deal with this injury and he's going to be out for a long period of time. And then of course we get to what was going to be the co-main event of the evening, and obviously that was Uriah Hall. He was supposed to take on Vitor Belfort in what was proposed to be Vitor Belfort's last fight, maybe last fight in the UFC. Maybe he would have gone elsewhere to fight afterwards, but at least the last fight on his current deal with the Ultimate Fighting Championship. And Uriah Hall ends up having a seizure. Some people are blaming weight-cutting issues, saying he cut too much weight and 185's not there. And, it's one of those things where it's an unfortunate scenario. It's an unfortunate situation. And I don't think it was a weight-cutting issue. I could be completely wrong. It's something that I don't see him changing weight classes. I don't think he should have to change, weight classes. But it's something that I just think was a situation that just happened. And it's unfortunate because I really wanted to see that fight. Now, on the other side of the coin, you can kind of go, well, Vitor Belfort in St. Louis, was that maybe the best place to retire? I think I talked about this with Kayla before. Wouldn't it have been better to kind of send him off in Brazil on a Brazilian card? And obviously he's had so much success fighting in Brazil over the last several years. I just think that, on maybe a bigger card, I think that may have been a situation that maybe was, as much as you want to say, oh, I want to see Vitor Belfort fight, you want to see him go out and have a great fight against a fighter that definitely has a great skill set to match his. But I think it kind of will work out a little bit. And it's not to say I don't think he should take on Uriah Hall again. I'd like to see that fight. I just think it could have taken place in a better setting for him to go out. And I think going out in Brazil makes a lot more sense than if he would have went out here in St. Louis. That's all I'm saying. I just think that there's the UFC's never done a fight in St. Louis before. You know. Now that brings up the issue of Vitor Belfort wanting to get paid, because he obviously showed up, was going to weigh in until obviously he found out that Uriah Hall wasn't going to weigh in. He wouldn't be able to. He had already been rushed to the hospital, and was asking for a percentage or at least something of his show money. And I think that's valid. I think if you make it, honestly, I think if you make it to fight week, which if you fight on Saturday, typically most fighters get there that Tuesday before in whatever city it may be. I think if you make it to fight week and your fight gets canceled for whatever reason, I think you should get a percentage of your show money, if not all of it. Now, someone was saying, oh, the UFC can't afford to do all this and stuff. Well, they've already put that money aside. They already know the budget for the card. They've already went out and said that this is how much money we're going to spend on the card. And so, to me, in terms of where the money is coming from, they've already put that aside. And that's kind of what I'm thinking, is they already have the money to put aside. So it shouldn't be an issue of trying to put money in Vitor Belfort's pocket or even Uriah Hall's pocket or any of these things. And it brings up the real big question, how come the UFC doesn't have some sort of policy involved? It's kind of just been a case-by-case basis. Like if they make it to weigh-ins and then do it, oh, then they give the guy the show money, or then they give him this, or then they give them that. I think I would make it, if you make it to fight week and a fight gets canceled, you should at least be able to get half your money. At the very least, you should be able to get half your show money to the fighter that obviously was healthy and ready to go. If you're injured and you have to pull out even days before the event, I think you can make a case where maybe you shouldn't get the money. Maybe. I think you shouldn't get the money if you miss the weight, if it clearly is due to weight cutting complication. But in a case like Zach Cummings, where he makes it to fight week, slips in the bathtub, and breaks his head, that's a crazy accident. That's not something Zach Cummings planned to do. He was doing everything right. He just happened to have an accident, and he made it to fight week. So that in that case, you can say, all right, we're only going to give you half. We're only going to give you 25%. Sure, that's not great, but it's something. These guys and girls train way too hard for way too long to fight in this organization, to then have something like that, a fluke accident, and then they don't get paid. Now, sure, the UFC is probably going to take care of them in terms of medical and stuff, but that's besides the point. Helping with injuries. That's something they've been doing for a while, and that's something that should be inspected to help their athletes get healed up. So that's a separate issue. I'm just talking about the contract that they signed. When they show up to fight week, they should almost kind of be guaranteed they get paid unless they miss weight or have to leave due to a weight cutting issue, because to me, that's on them not being able to make the weight. Slipping in the bathtub, that's an accident. That could happen to anybody. That could happen to me today. I could slip out of the bathtub, crack my head, next thing I know, my skull's fractured. But luckily for me, I don't have to compete in mixed martial arts. I just talk about it here on this program and hope that everyone enjoys it. So I think that's something that in this 2018 year and really in the past 18 months is starting to happen a lot more than I would like and probably most fans would like. The fact that fights are getting canceled days before the event. And that gets us, in crazy situations like Joe Soto filling in to get a title shot on a couple days' notice. And it also, the UFC likes to cover themselves. And really when I say the UFC, I mean Dana White, by saying, oh, well, why would we pay Vitor Belfort? He turned down a fight. Okay, you're going to have Vitor Belfort turn down a fight less than 24 hours against somebody that isn't prepared, that someone's just show up and wait, that he has, no bearing, was not preparing for at all. I don't think that's right. I don't think that's right to force him to take that, and I don't think that's right to say, oh, well, he turned down the fight. That's why we're not going to give him the show money, because we gave him an opportunity. Nobody really wants to fight anybody on a day's notice, especially Vitor Belfort. He's going out. This is his last fight. He wants to go out on a win, presumably, right? You'd like to go out on a win if you have a sporting career, right? Typically don't want to go out on a loss. And I think that loss of opponent, you bring in somebody new, that increases the risk because you're not sure what's going on. You're not sure what this person's going to bring to the table. That completely changes what you just spent, what is presumably, in Vitor Belfort's case, the last fight camp of your career. And it's really unfortunate that this happened to him. But now, of course, there's rumors of him fighting Michael Bisping. Michael Bisping is squashing those rumors. That's a great fight. But I think there are other fights out there for Vitor Belfort, whether that's Uriah Hall or whether that's somebody else. But I think it should take place in Brazil. I don't know if they can get him out. I think there's a card coming up in Brazil in a few weeks with Machida in the main event. So I don't know if that's something they could add him to, because he should still be in pretty good shape. But we'll see. I don't. It's unfortunate because I would have liked to seen him compete here at UFC St. Louis, but lo and behold, he didn't. So we'll obviously pay attention to that as the story goes along, and hopefully we get to see Vitor Belfort compete inside the cage one more time. So, all right, so we're going to move along here to the rest of UFC St. Louis. Again, 4 fights were featured on the undercard, and looking at the 4 fights featured on the undercard. 4 fights were featured on the main card. Looking at the undercard, very great performance by Polo Reyes as he was able to take out Matt Frevola in just a minute in the first round. I was actually watching this with a friend of mine, and he had never heard of Polo Reyes before. And when they kind of showed the highlights for coming up on the prelims and all that, they obviously show Polo Reyes. I said, dude, can't wait, Polo Reyes. He's like, who's that? I'm like, just watch. And he did not disappoint, completely dismantling Frevola. No offense to Frevola, who I believe was 6-0 entering this matchup, but not ready for a guy the caliber of Polo Reyes, and it definitely showed, and very deserving of a performance of the night bonus for Mr. Reyes, and as he dispatched him in a minute. Also, got to give Kyung Ho Kang a big shout out on his triangle choke victory over Guido Canetti, and this was a fight where Canetti was winning, in my opinion, and he was able to land some ground and pound. I thought he was winning the stand-up. I thought he tagged him a few times, and then the fight went to the ground. I believe Guido was able to land a takedown. Then Kang was able to lock up that triangle choke. Guido actually picked him up, and this was a really good adjustment by Kang on the pickup and the ensuing slam attempt by Guido. Kang actually grabbed the back of the head to prevent the slam. So in that case, they kind of went back up against the cage, and Guido, with the head pressure, obviously the not only from grabbing the head but the triangle choke, was able to it slowly worked back down. And that's, to me, the choke probably even got tighter from going up and then going back down. It slipped in and went back in, and it even made the choke tighter. And that's what got the tap there just before the end of the round. And I think that was a very impressive performance, a very impressive submission for Kyo Kang to get that win and really avoid to get that win and make that adjustment and an excellent submission, a fight that he wasn't winning. So very good win for him. Then also, we got to look at it. Let's see, Ariana Donald, I thought, had a pretty impressive performance. She was able to get a victory. Jessica Ai returns back to the winning track as she takes on Kalindra Faria. JJ Aldrich gets a win. Mads Burnell gets a win, too, over Matt Santiago. And then we had the card end with a really good fight between James Krause and Alex White. And this was a fight where I thought that Alex White would be a little overmatched against a bigger fighter in James Krause. Obviously, Alex White had fought in the UFC previously, 145 pounds. Obviously, James Krause, we talked about this on the preview to the show, was thinking about fighting at 170, where he did compete on the Ultimate Fighter. So I thought that was something that was going to be interesting to see if the size difference would be a really big factor. And Alex White, yeah, he got out-wrestled a little bit by a guy that is a better grappler. Definitely, like I said, had a little more size. But standing up, I always thought James Krause was a pretty solid striker, but Alex White was kind of taking it to him, to be honest. I mean, Alex White was coming right at him. He was throwing bombs. He was not afraid to go in there and mix it up with James Krause. He was not afraid about being an underdog, being the smaller guy, or anything like that, and just kept coming in this fight. And James Krause, he took a beating. That's for sure. I mean, you look at his face after this fight, when they're talking to him with the announce crew, with Paul Felder, he definitely got hit. He definitely got hurt in this matchup. And while I don't completely disagree with Krause getting the victory, I do think Alex White was very close to winning this fight. He for sure did way more damage in this fight than James Krause. James Krause definitely was a better grappler, definitely was able to hold him down. Landed a few nice shots, but to me wasn't really close to finishing this fight, wasn't really close to putting him away even with a submission. And yeah, got the victory, but excuse me. He did enough to get the victory. He did what he had to do, and I just think that Alex White, he should hold his head high because this was his first fight in a new weight class up. He took on a very experienced fighter in James Krause and nearly got away with the victory. So for Alex White, obviously maybe bulking up a little more, work on that grappling game a little more, because it's clear that this guy definitely has the chops to compete at 155 pounds. And he exceeded my expectations in a loss. So, and I've talked with Alex White a couple of times before. I've interviewed him before. Very nice guy, very humble kid, hardworking guy from right there in Missouri. So I'm sure that was a treat being able to fight there in his home state. And he definitely brought it. And that should be a performance that he should be happy with overall. Now, there's some things you got to work on because you can see why he got the loss. But overall, I think that was a really solid performance. And if I was James Krause, I think you got to think a little bit because that's a fight he should have won on paper, I think, very easily. And I think he's really going to make a choice whether 155 or 170 is for him because he said the weight cut didn't bother him, but he looked off in that fight. And I don't know if it was because he had spent an extended period of time at 170 pounds, but he was definitely off in this fight. And I think he's going to have to make a serious decision. And I think maybe moving up to 170 might be what's best for him because I think that might give him a lot more extra cardio to move forward with his career. All right, thanks for the comments, James and Joe. I'm definitely going to be getting there to the UFC 220 main card here in a little bit. And trying to get, but thanks for the comment, guys. Yeah, I did actually, James Anthony. That's what what I opened the show with was talking about gender wars. So I did discuss that at length, and yeah, I'm very interested. Obviously, in the main event, I'm very intrigued by it. I'm glad that it was able to be put together so quickly following Ngannou's win at UFC 218. So I'm super excited about that. So. we're going to get along to the main card here for UFC 200, UFC St. Louis before we get to UFC 220. That's going to start with Darren Elkins against Michael Johnson in the featherweight division. I want to talk about disappointing performances. I could say I was a little disappointed in James Krause's performance, but Michael Johnson moving down, first of all, I didn't think was a great move, but talent-wise, he should have beat somebody like Darren Elkins. He definitely has more skill than Darren Elkins, and even now after the fight, I still believe that. However, Darren Elkins is a guy that is a very hard-working individual. He's a very tough guy to put away, and if you're going to put him away, you got to make sure he's out. And round one, Michael Johnson dominated him. I mean, he outstruck him 43-15. He stopped all three of Darren Elkins' takedowns, rocked him a few times. It was not looking good for Darren Elkins, and Michael Johnson was starting to make me think, all right, maybe he did make the right move to 145. He looked pretty good. Then in the second round, Darren Elkins was able to land a early takedown. Michael Johnson couldn't get back to his feet. He got outstruck 39-3. Not a good rate. And then gets the back taken and gets the choke sunken in and has to tap at 222 into the second round. And that was all she wrote. This was a very unfortunate fight from Michael Johnson and very unfortunate performance. This was not a good second round for him. Obviously, the first round was good. And really, as I was thinking about it, preparing for the show, Michael Johnson has kind of made a career of, beating guys maybe above him, but then also like losing to guys below him. I mean, this is a guy who has a win over Tony Ferguson, right? This is a guy who has a win over Edson Barboza. This is a guy who has a win over Dustin Poirier, right? Those are all pretty good fighters, even now. Those are all guys that are very highly touted individuals, right? And then he loses to Benil Dariush, right? He loses to Nate Diaz. He gets mauled by Khabib Nurmagomedov. He loses to Justin Gaethje, right? Loses to Reza Madadi. Loses to Miles Jury. He's... I don't know if there's been a guy... He's like the best... worst fighter, because he's clearly beaten some top guys in the UFC. That's apparent. But he's also lost. He's had some bad losses, and he's also lost to some pretty good fighters too. And I get why he wanted to move down to 145. Obviously, before the Elkins fight, he had lost 4 or 5. That's usually a sign that something isn't working. But to have that... I hate to say, yeah, Elkins got him in a bad spot, but it almost felt like when Johnson got taken down, it's almost like he kind of gave up a little bit. He really didn't, to me, work. He didn't seem like he had a sense of urgency in that second round and let a guy that he should be, a guy that he is more talented than, beat him. And not only beat him, but put him away. And I don't know if Michael Johnson should retire. I think you can look at that. I think that's something that's on the table, but something isn't going right with him. And I don't think it's physical. I think it is mental. And I don't think it's something that I don't know will be easily fixed. He's definitely going to have to take some time off. I'm going to say at least 6 months before he does something. And I would say of the 6 months, most of it should just be spent away from fighting. I think he needs to take some time off, try to reset, and think really hard what he wants to do with his life. Because right now, it doesn't look like mixed martial arts is something he really wants to do, if I'm being honest. And I think you can look at that second round and go, this is a guy that just... he's not hungry. There's not a fire there anymore. And for a guy, like I said, that has some good wins, really, Dustin Poirier was less than a year ago. Or I'm sorry, it was a little over a year ago. He knocked out Dustin Poirier. That was almost like his re-return into the lightweight division. Now, 3 fights later, here just to start 2018, it looks like not only is he done in the UFC, or should be done, because he's lost 5 of his last 6. I think that's grounds for getting cut. I think his career might be over too. He's definitely going to have to make some serious adjustments. Actually, it's funny. We have a guy named Michael Johnson commenting in. I feel like the Diaz fight mentally did some things to Johnson. He hasn't been on in a while. I mean, you could say that, but then he came back and knocked out Dustin Poirier. So I think it wasn't just the Diaz fight. I think it's kind of been a build-up, really, Michael commenting, really since his loss to Beneil Dariush. I was live for that fight in Nashville. That's a fight he probably should have won. I know he lost it, but looking back at that fight, he probably should have won that fight. So I don't think he was in a good space after that fight. Takes on Nate Diaz. It was a good fight. That was a competitive fight. Yeah, he lost, but that was a very competitive fight against Nate Diaz. Let's not get that twisted. And let's not act like he got completely dominated or anything like that. That was 3-10-8 rounds or something like that. Michael Johnson did have some success in that fight. He did lose it, and I'm not arguing that, but that was a competitive fight. It got Diaz really kind of pulled away a little bit in the third round. I will say that. He comes back. He has that big knockout over Dustin Poirier. Okay? Then a couple months later, he gets mauled by Michael Johnson. So, Michael Johnson gets mauled by Khabib. Again, the way he just took out Barboza, we can't really say anything about that. Justin Gaethje won, incredible, but he got beat. It seemed like after that first round he was done, and you can make a case after the first round this fight he was done. So definitely something has to change with Michael Johnson, whether that's actually walking away from the sport or whether that's a situation that is just physical. I don't know. It looks mental though, and I agree with you, Michael. Something's going to have to change from him. And like I said, I think he's going to have to take some time away from the sport to come back and really be 100% or in any division, whether that's 145 or 155. Welterweight Kamaru Usman versus Emil Meek. As much as I wanted to think Kamaru Usman was going to show off some of his newfound stand-up prowess, realistically, I had a feeling this is what he was going to do against Emil, and that's what he did. He wrestled him. He grinded his victory out. I guess you could say this was kind of vintage Kamaru Usman. He got the victory. What can I say? It wasn't very pretty. I mean, 8-19 is not exactly like crushing it in the takedown department, but he still took him down 8 times. He outstruck him 112-86. He put him in some bad positions. The thing is, Meek's just not at that level of wrestling. Kamaru Usman I believe they said, is a national champion, collegiate wrestler, All-American, all that good stuff. It was going to be really hard for Meek to combat that with one training camp. And Meek's never faced anybody like that in his career. And that's just what some of these guys can do to you, especially in this division, the welterweight division, where there's a lot of strong wrestlers. And I'm not very surprised. Usman had some comments after the fight, which, you can think whatever you want. I thought it was funny, Dana White saying it's the most ridiculous thing he's ever heard a fighter say, which is ridiculous in itself, because I think there's been more ridiculous things said in a post-fight interview. But I think the fight to make now is Usman versus Colby Covington. I think that's the fight to make, and I think you can make a case that's a number one contender, especially if Colby Covington wins. Now, I know Covington, a guy that likes to talk himself, is saying, I beat Damian Maia, I dismantled him, this and that, I should be the next one. But I'm going to be honest, I think RDA is the more intriguing matchup than Colby Covington. I think he presents a lot more issues for Tyron Woodley. First of all, Colby Covington is not a guy that really finishes people. He's a guy that just out-wrestles people. And I think he's going to find that very hard to do against Tyron Woodley, and Woodley is the better striker. So I'm not saying Colby Covington has no chance. Nobody has no chance in a fight. But I think RDA has a better chance to win the fight, despite being a little smaller. You add in his jiu-jitsu background. You add in his conditioning. You add in his output that he can put on at welterweight. And you got to say, his chin. Yeah, I know he got caught by Eddie Alvarez, but he took some hits from Robbie Lawler. It's not like he just avoided everything Robbie Lawler threw him. And Robbie Lawler hits as hard as anybody, even at this stage in his career. So I think that, and also you play up the storyline of being a champion in multiple weight classes and stuff. I think you make RDA versus Woodley. I think Woodley's injured, not injured. I'm not sure. I think that's the fight to make. and then you have Colby Covington versus Kamaru Usman. I think those two big wrestlers, they'll kind of cancel each other out. We'll get to see which one is truly kind of the big bad, next young up-and-coming wrestler guy. And I think you have that there. And hopefully we get a Darren Till versus Stephen Thompson. Maybe kind of is, you can even make a case like a backup contender or something if something goes wrong. And this is all, of course, predicated that Tyron Woodley can fight RDA in a timely manner here in the next few months. If that's not happened, Woodley's out a lot longer than we think he's going to be, then I guess an interim title is in the works, and then you would probably have to match up RDA against somebody. I think you can kind of take your pick between probably, I would say, Covington or Stephen Thompson would probably be my two choice candidates if they had to make an interim against RDA. I think RDA secure that spot to me, but we'll see what's going on with that. Once again, comment down below with any questions. I appreciate them. Keep them coming for sure. As we move along here for UFC St. Louis, we're going to get to the next fight of the evening. That was the co-main event, or the new co-main event, after Vitor Belfort and Uriah Hall dropped off. Jessie Jess, a.k.a. Jessica Rose Clark, against Paige Van Zant. Now, a lot of people, have been critical of Paige, and I think we're maybe too critical of Paige in this fight. You got to look at a couple different things. One, she changed her training camp. Anytime your first fight with a new camp, I think there's going to be somewhat of an adjustment period. Two, it was a new weight class, and up a weight class. So that's going to present its problems, obviously, dealing with girls that are going to be a little bigger than you and a little stronger with you. That is something she's going to have to get used to, because she was always kind of the bigger girl before. Now she's kind of the smaller girl or average size girl. So I think that was a new thing to deal with. Three, she hadn't fought a fight in over a year. Definitely going to be some layoff and ring rust as well. Then you add in, during the fight, after the first round, she broke her arm and still continued. I think that's going to throw anyone off their game, breaking their arm. They showed the x-ray. That thing was messed up. Okay? So I think that was going to throw everyone off. So when you add all that in, I think she performed well. She didn't perform great. She didn't perform enough to get a victory. But I think considering all those circumstances, I thought she performed well. Jessica Rose Clark, I did pick to win. I thought her size would be the difference. She was the one on the roll. I think she gained a lot of confidence in that win over Beck Rawlings, coming in on short notice. And she had her own issues to deal with too. First of all, being the scale. This was only, I think, her second or third career fight, even scheduled for 125 pounds. She missed 125 the last time out against Beck. So obviously, that was an obstacle she had to overcome. Then during fight week in St. Louis, her home in Australia was robbed with her cat being killed. So she had to find out that news. That couldn't have been great mentally, knowing that your house is all messed up at home, and once you get home, you're gonna, what should be a momentous time, obviously, potentially winning a UFC fight, winning another UFC fight. It should be nice time to relax and celebrate and all this stuff, and you got to go home to this completely messed up situation. You have to deal with your home being robbed and the loss of a pet. That's a whole thing. So it's not like she didn't have stuff going on either. And definitely, I thought, performed very well those first two rounds, especially in that second round. I don't know how she didn't get that triangle choke. I know the foot was a little off. The connecting foot wasn't quite more over the shin. It was a little towards the foot, but she had the arm across, the squeeze. I just credit to Paige. She just found enough room to not get it there. And obviously, the longer you hold on to a triangle choke, the longer your legs are maybe going to start to burn a little bit. Maybe she did burn herself a little bit out. You had in the weight cut, because in the third round, Jessie Jess, to me, was coasting. Paige picked it up a little bit, but again, with the broken arm, I'm sure that hurt like heck. There was only, she obviously was throwing a lot of kicks, didn't really want to engage, grappling, didn't want to throw the right hand, so she kind of was coasting a little bit. To me, Paige did enough to win the third round, but that wasn't enough overall. And for Jessica Rose Clark, a good win, not a great performance, but she got the job done. This is now her second win in a row in this division over two quality opponents in Bec Rawlings and Paige Van Zandt. I think you can make a case of Jessica Rose Clark fighting Nico Montoya for the flyweight championship. She, as of right now, has the most wins in UFC women's flyweight history, for whatever that's worth, with 2. But I think you can really make a case of her fighting Nico coming up next. The only other girl I could possibly see, obviously Lauren Murphy defeated Barb Honchak on the main card there. Obviously you have Sajara Eubanks out there as well, who was supposed to fight Nico originally for the inaugural championship. But with her missing weight, I don't know if the UFC wants to give her, that chance at the championship again, coming off the missed weight. So I have a couple different options. Obviously, I haven't really heard much about the title picture here. I think it'll be close to 2 months since Nico fought. Obviously, that was a 5-round fight, so I'm not sure what the timetable is her for returning. And obviously, with Jessie just having fought this fight card, and I think that fight in Australia was either late November or early December, so that wasn't that long ago that she fought Bec Rawlings. And obviously now dealing with this, home invasion stuff, Jessie just might have to take some time off. But I think she put herself in a very good situation to compete for a championship potentially this year for the women's flyweight division. All right, looking at the main event, boy, this was definitely a great fight. Very deserving of the fight of the night honor. And really, to me, what this fight boiled down to was a couple different things. One, Stephens being really aggressive, not allowing Choi to kind of sit back and get comfortable in this fight. And also, I want to add in the fact that I didn't think Choi was doing a great job of protecting his chin. I think he was really confident that his chin would hold out, and it didn't. Jeremy Stephens is a guy that hits really hard and throws really hard. He has bad intentions in almost every strike that he throws. And to kind of leave your hands up and really try to just move out with your head, I don't think was a really great strategy. And I think that was one of the reasons why Stephens was able to land that big haymaker to win this fight. Because if you look at the strikes, Stephens landed 49, Choi landed 45. So Choi was countering a little bit, but he threw about 50 less strikes. 133 for Stephens, 80 for Choi. And I think that kind of chasing nature of Stephens, not allowing Choi to really get his feet set, trying to have him strike backwards, I think was a really good strategy, because Choi is a guy that definitely throws power, and he definitely hurt Stephens in this fight too. There were definitely some shots that caught Stephens. But that biggest change, like I said, was that counter off the kick, that straight right in the second round. That was starting at the beginning of the end. That really affected Choi. And then he, of course, then threw that other overhand right later. And that was really the big difference in this fight. That was kind of the beginning and end. I think that's the one thing that I would say that was kind of wrong with him, was him relying on his chin too much. And I think that's something that he's going to have to work on coming up. Now, I know he has that military leave. I said on last week's show he should have already done that, because this has been a little over a year since his last fight, that awesome fight against Cub Swanson. So now he didn't get knocked out in that fight, but he definitely took a lot of damage. This fight, it was a good stoppage. He definitely got hurt. I don't think he took as much damage, obviously, in the Cub Swanson fight, but he definitely took some hard shots. I think he obviously should have already done it, but I think now is the time. Do it now. Get this out of the way. Because I don't think getting on a big winning streak and still having that looming over you and having that in the back of your head, it just can't. I don't know. I just feel like that would mess with me, knowing I got something like that and things are going well, and then all of a sudden you just got to stop. I think now is the time to do it. You're 26 years old. You would return when you're 28. You still would be the prime of your career. You really get to make sure you can recover, and you still can train. It doesn't stop you from training mixed martial arts. It just stops you from obviously performing at a professional level, and you can really work on the things in your game you need to work on. And obviously, the one being putting your hands up. That he's going to have to change that, because I think this was a prime example of a guy that he definitely was good enough to beat, but kind of let it slip away, thinking just speed and reaction were going to work, and that's not always the case. He's got to get his hands up a little more, and obviously learning to strike more off his back foot, because it seems as though Cub found success putting on his back foot, and obviously Stevens found success putting him on his back foot. So he's going to really have to learn countering going back, or learning how to circle more to cut those angles. So those are the two things I think he would really have to work on. It's always good to always work off your back and ground game and stopping takedowns and all that stuff too. But as far as striking, those are the little holes in his game that I think he can fix. And if you're able to do that and work out for 2 years and just practice a lot of those things, he should be able to come back and pick right where he left off, really. So I think that's something he can share. I think he should make that decision relatively quickly. I would say sometime next month decide whether or not he's going to do that here. I just think that he obviously has to do this. This is something that's a window that he has to take at a certain amount of time. But I think now is the time. Now is the time to do it, because I think if he starts back up again, gets back on a roll, he's not going to want to leave. And then that puts him in a very precarious position where he's stopping right at the height of his success. So that's not when you should be stopping. That's when you should be continuing on. So we'll see, though. But Jeremy Stevens, very big win for him. He's a guy that's definitely kind of folded a little bit against guys that are elite or near elite, and now he's had 2 very good wins in a row after losing 3 of 4. He comes back and has 2 fight of the night performances against Gilbert Melendez and now Doo-Ho Choi. I still don't know if he's a serious contender yet. Actually, the guy I would like to see him take on next is Josh Emmett, coming off that big victory over Ricardo Lamas. With his power coupled with Stevens' power, I think that would be a fantastic fight, and that's the matchup I would like to see, is Jeremy Stevens against Emmett. I think that's definitely the fight to make, and I'm really looking forward to that one if it can go down sometime here in 2018. But that's what I would like to see. All right, Bellator 192, going to go over this real quickly here. Again, thanks to everybody for joining me. I'm your host, Jim Graham. You can follow me on Twitter at Jim Graham. Please like MMA World, like MMA UK. Follow us on our other social medias as well. Looking at this card, 5 fights featured on the Bellator 192 main card. We have the return of Aaron Pico. He will be taking on Shane Crutchin. I'm going to be honest. I don't get Bellator's matchmaking. So they give Aaron Pico, a guy he probably shouldn't have been in there with, in his first fight, in a weight class he shouldn't have been at 155, okay, against Zach Freeman, and he gets smashed in a minute or whatever, right? So then in the second fight, they get him at his weight class, and they put him against the guy that's 7-3. Okay, it's at his natural weight class, but again, a guy, I'm not sure if that was right. However, he proves me wrong. He goes out there, shows a fantastic stand-up combination, and gets an incredible uppercut knockout in the first round. All right? Exceeds my expectations a little bit. So, all right, give him like a 2-1 guy, 3-1 guy, 2-0, right? There's guys like out there, right? Because you're trying to build up Aaron Pico. It shouldn't matter. You're not there to show his opponent. So give him someone, with like 5 or less fights, right? Nope. We're going to give him a guy that's 12-3. I mean, I just don't get this matchmaking. Here's a guy that's 12-3. He lost his first 2 fights in his career to guys way bigger than him, guys that actually have fought at 185 pounds. And Luke Zacharich and Gerald Meeschart, both in the UFC. Those were his first 2 ever professional fights. And since that time, he's won 12 out of 13 fights. He had 1 loss, which was in 2014, which he lost to Mike Corey by submission. Now, however, he has not fought since December of 2016. So he's been out for 2 years. So you can kind of make a case, well, he's been out for 2 years, he needs a bounce-back fight, let's have him take on this young guy. But to me, again, they're building up Aaron Pico. They're not trying to build up Shane Crutchin, I guess by proxy, but that's not what their really goal is doing. They're trying to build up Aaron Pico. And even the guy with the 2-year layoff, I don't know. I think they're giving this guy too much of an experienced guy right off rip. I don't know if anyone disagrees with that, and I'm welcome to argue with it with you if you comment down below, but I just think that they're just going about this. I mean, his first 3 fights are against dudes that all have over 10 professional bouts. I don't know. I think that's too much. There's nobody that has 5 or less fights that they can find for this kid at 145 pounds. I know a host of fighters over here in Michigan that have less than 10 fights at 145 pounds. I'm telling you, it's not that hard if you actually look and open your eyes. I don't know. All right, speaking of featherweight division, our friend Miles Painter here today, excellent preview, talking about Henry Corrales, 14-3 so far in his career. He's taking on Georgie Karakhanyan, who'll be the hometown fighter there. Trains over at Millennium MMA in Rancho Cucamonga. And Henry Corrales, or Henry Corrales, however you want to say that, has definitely looked really good as of late. This is a guy that kind of had a bad start to his Bellator career, losing 3 in a row, but losing to very talented individuals. Speaking of bringing up someone maybe the wrong way, he takes on Daniel Strauss, Emmanuel Sanchez, and Patricio Pitbull in his first 3 fights in Bellator. Ouch! Those are some tough dudes. And, of course, he loses all 3, gets finished in 2 of them. Then they give him Cody Bollinger, guy that had been on The Ultimate Fighter, guy who had competed in World Series of Fighting, a really solid individual. Knocks Cody out in the 3rd round. Very impressive victory for Mr. Corrales. Then gets on the very tough Noad Lahat, who obviously has been a feature in both fights that they've had in Israel, was able to beat Noad. And so I think he's really learned from those fights. And now he's taking on Georgie Karakhanyan, again, a guy that was the former World Series of Fighting champion, a guy, when signed to Bellator, thought he was going to be an instant factor in their featherweight division, especially when you figure that he submitted Bubba Jenkins in the 1st round in his first ever fight. Then he got thoroughly outclassed by Daniel Weichel. I think he got outclassed by Pat Curran. Then he rematches Bubba Jenkins. Somehow he's got Bubba's number, I guess, because he knocked out Bubba in the 1st round in the rematch. Then he takes on a guy in Kirill Medovsky. I think he got hurt, but he was winning that fight. Then takes on another high-ranked guy in Emmanuel Sanchez. It was a majority decision, but in my opinion, got beaten there. Then takes on Daniel Pineda, a very solid individual. Knocks him out in the 2nd round. So he's very much been an up-and-down guy. And I think had this fight been, 3 years ago, I think Karakhanyan probably would have smashed Henry Corrales. I don't think too many people would argue with that. However, Corrales right now is the guy on the roll. Karakhanyan, not saying he's not talented anymore, but definitely he doesn't seem to competing at that same level. And really, this is kind of almost his last chance. If he loses the Henry Corrales, that would be that would put him 2 of 3 recently. I'm not sure if he can climb his way back up the featherweight ladder. He may have already missed his opportunity. So this is a really pivotal fight for him. Now Corrales, yeah, he's 31. He's only a year younger. Has less fights. This would only be his 18th professional fight. But I would say, he didn't come in with that same level of prestige as Karakhanyan. So I don't think that if he loses, he's done. But I think with Canyon, obviously what they're paying him, you got to factor that in a lot, because I'm sure he wasn't cheap coming off, a World Series of Fighting run, even though his last fight in World Series of Fighting was a loss of his championship. I think you add in that, he's kind of been a bust. Other than beating Bubba Jenkins twice, he hasn't really beat anybody super noteworthy. So, and then you add in he loses to Corrales. That's a situation where he could even get cut from Bellator. So I think this is a really big fight for Canyon. And because of that, he may be pressing. And somebody like Corrales, a guy that, is maybe starting to kind of come into his own a little bit. That could be somebody that could kind of take advantage of that and possibly pull an upset victory and move along in his career in the featherweight division and move up. I got a question from Lewis. How's the jiu-jitsu going? Pretty good. I actually went back to class. It was my first real full class in about 2 weeks. I actually competed in a tournament. I think it'll be 2 weeks or 3 weeks as of this Saturday. So I competed in my first tournament. Did not do well. I lost both my matches, but that's all right. Learning experience there. So I'm returning to training and still at it, still on the grind, and know what I got to work on, know what parts of my game were lacking. I did a few things right. Obviously did some things wrong. So I'm looking forward to getting back into it. I'll probably compete again this summer, probably around my birthday. But I'm glad I went out there and did it. I know what to expect. I know the situation. I didn't feel what's the word? I didn't feel like shock and awe. I didn't feel pressure. I didn't feel tired. I didn't feel like an adrenaline. Nothing like that. It just felt like training on a mat with a lot of people, and there were more people standing around. So nothing like that fazed me or anything. It's just simply I made some mistakes that got me caught in some submissions, and just got to work on that and work on a few things. But overall, I had a game plan. I was able to halfly execute it, so now I just got to work on the second half of my game plan to execute it. So, all right, getting on the main card, man. I'm super excited for this fight. I mean, I'm super excited anytime this guy competes, but Michael Chandler against Goto Yamauchi, I'm super excited for. This is a very good stylistic matchup. Obviously, you have a very strong power wrestler in Michael Chandler going against a very excellent, speaking of jiu-jitsu, Lewis, very excellent jiu-jitsu player in Goto Yamauchi. And Yamauchi's a solid striker, nothing amazing, but obviously Michael Chandler is a very powerful striker, and I think it's going to be excellent. The winner, obviously, to me, fights for the World Championship. Chandler should already be fighting for the World Championship again, because we all know he didn't really lose to I can't even think of the guy's name because it was that much of a disappointment. Brent, boy, why can't I think of his name? I was going to say Aaron Pico. Brent Primus. Yeah, the most unlikely champion in anyone's history. So, yeah, I think he's just going to be... this is a tough fight. Obviously, if I was Michael Chandler, despite that strong top game and power that he has, I wouldn't want to mess with Yamauchi on the ground. I just avoid that. And the good thing for Chandler, only a 3-minute fight, only a 3-round fight. Obviously, a guy that's really used to 5-rounders. This is a good way to ease him back, make sure that his leg's okay. And I'm super excited for this one. I think this fight could steal the show, if I'm being honest. I really do. I think it could steal the show. I'm super excited for that one. Douglas Lima against Rory McDonald. Boy, it's a great fight. What I see being the difference... Douglas Lima obviously was very technical in his win over Renz Larkin. Now, Rory McDonald has been out technical before. Look at his fight against Stephen Thompson. But I'm not sure if Douglas Lima can out technical Rory McDonald. It'd be very tough to do. Now, the X factor is Rory McDonald trying to take down Douglas Lima. I do think that's a possibility in this fight. However, I think Rory's going to feel things out before he shoots in. I don't think he's just going to immediately shoot in on Douglas Lima, because I would consider him more of a striking-based fighter. Now, the key for Douglas Lima is going to be able to land those leg kicks, because that's the one thing that he possesses that is superior, truly superior, than Rory McDonald. Rory McDonald does not have that type of leg kick. He just doesn't. He's a tough dude. He can be scrappy. He is a big and strong guy, but he doesn't possess that. And so for Douglas Lima, I would hit that early and often. Then start pumping in the jab. Then start pumping in your right hand. And if you're Rory McDonald, you got to be present at that leg kick. Hopefully you practice you checking your leg kicks, because you got to be able to check, come inside, counter, work for takedown. That's how I see this fight playing out. I think there's a chance it could be technical, a little boring, but if it starts to get later in rounds, and if Lima is able to land some power shots, force the brawl out of Rory McDonald, which we've seen brought out in his war the second time with Robbie Lawler, there's a chance this can be super exciting. It's just, does Douglas Lima do enough to force Rory McDonald to do that? I don't know, because Rory is pretty comfortable not doing that. He's pretty comfortable being a point fighter. And if it stays a point fight, it's going to be hard for Douglas Lima to win. But he has to start in steps, because he's a guy that is a big 170 himself. He is a guy that cuts a good amount of weight. So pace himself, work up to that point, work to that third or fourth round to really go and get after him. And that's where I see the key going in this fight. All right, Quentin Rampage Jackson against Chael Sonnen. Obviously, Chael, I'm not really sure. This is a dude that's a 185er fighting in a heavyweight tournament. I'm not really sure what he's doing. You know, Rampage has obviously ballooned up since his days fighting at 205 pounds. He is a very powerful guy, very strong guy. I don't know if Chael can get this thing to the ground. I just don't know. I just don't really see that happening. I mean, obviously Chael's going to have the better conditioning, but I mean, it is only a 15-minute fight. It's not like Rampage had to cut weight. There should be no issue there. I don't know. I just think that maybe Sonnen might be able to tie him enough to get the first round, but I think he's going to have a tough time trying to deal with that size, and then probably get caught with something. That's how I see this going. I'm not really sure. I get why he's doing it, because he's at the end of his career. He gets money. You know, what does he have to lose? No one expects him to win this tournament. No one expects him to win the match. So, you know, who cares, right? Who cares whether Chael Sonnen wins or lose? So, I think this would be I don't know what the odds are. I don't have any odds in front of me, but I think this would be a really big upset if Chael Sonnen beats Rampage Jackson. I don't see that happening. Very, very huge upset. I just don't think he'll be able to deal with the size. I mean, it's a little intriguing because I'm a huge fan of Quentin Rampage Jackson, but man. All right, let's end the show here with UFC 220. Going to pick the main card really quick. The fight I'm looking forward to the most on the undercard, Matt Bessette against Enrique Barzola in the 145 division. Super excited for that one. I think that's going to be a really fantastic fight. That would, to me, be the really big highlight fight on the undercard. Also, I'm intrigued by Sabah Hamasi against Abdul Razak Al-Hazan. The reason for that fight actually happened here in my hometown at UFC 218 in Detroit, and there was a bad stoppage by Herb Dean on Hamasi, so they're running this fight back here at 220. I'm glad to see that they're running this one back, and so that one should be intriguing how that one's going to go the second time around after that bad call by Herb. A rare bad call by Herb, but it was a bad call nonetheless, and so we get to see that one, so super excited for that. All right, Thomas Almeida, Rob Font. Kicking off the main card here for UFC 220 in Boston. Obviously, this is Rob Font's hometown. He's from the Boston area, taking on Almeida, who obviously coming off a loss in his last fight against Jimmy Rivera, and also lost to Cody Garbrandt back in May of 2016. Does have a win coupled in there against Albert Morales. I think even though he lost to Rivera, that was a competitive fight. I think he did win a round in Rivera. I think Rivera's, wrestling, maybe a little bit of his speed, I think was something that he had to combat with. Rob Font is a fantastic striker in his own right. Grappling-wise, boy, I would say he's probably the better submission guy. He did have that really good win over Douglas Andrade back at UFC 213, with that submission. However, kind of got caught up and got caught in his last fight in October, which was kind of an upset, losing to Pedro Munoz, a fight that he was actually winning. Then got caught in that choke by Munoz. So obviously this is a fight Rob Font trying to get back on, both guys trying to get back on the winning track. But I would say of losses, that loss for Font was definitely had to be a little bit of an unnerving loss, considering he was winning. He gets caught. He returns now in his hometown, and he gets, no offense to Munoz, but Thomas Almeida is way better than Pedro Munoz. And so I think this is going to be a very tough fight for Rob Font. He's going to really have to be on his A game. He's really going to have to worry about the power, the speed, and I think he's going to have to try to get inside and try to take this down, because I think standing, I'm not sure if Rob Font has quite that quickness that found Jimmy Rivera. He doesn't quite have that wrestling ability that Jimmy Rivera does. And in the Cody fight, I just think if you run that back, excuse me, I think Almeida could win that fight. I really do. I think even now, because those two are such stand-up brawlers, it was a matter of time before one of them was going to get knocked out. So I don't think he's like that far behind the curve in Almeida. But I think Rob Font really is going to have to be on his A game. And I really do like both guys. But Almeida's kind of fought some of the best. I think he kind of knows what to expect. I think the biggest thing is make sure Almeida isn't overlooking Rob Font, because I think this is an easy fight to overlook, even though you're coming off a loss. Knowing that I'm ahead of this guy in the rankings, I've faced better guys, I've beaten better guys, and so this is a fight that kind of could be overlooked. And for Rob Font, he's obviously not going to overlook Almeida. Definitely, I would say probably the best guy he's faced in his career. He's fighting in his hometown. Obviously he's coming off a loss. He definitely has some pressure. That's to be for certain. I think it's going to be a tremendous fight. Great fight to kick off the first card. I don't think this one's going to be boring. I think both guys possess too much finishing ability for this to be a boring outcome. I think really what it's going to come down to is Font going to be able to counter the strikes effectively enough to either get off on his own strikes, or is he going to be able to get inside to tie up Almeida? Because I think those are really going to be the keys to success, because I think Almeida can knock out anyone, and I think can throw with extreme power, precision, and accuracy, and can do it for 15 minutes. And I don't think there's any question of that. Gian Villante versus Francimar Barroso. Both of these guys have, both guys have been very disappointing as of late, in my opinion. I think both guys are not really fighting up to their potential. I haven't really been impressed with Barroso his whole UFC tenure, which actually started in Boston against Elvis Mustaches, where he won. That was one of the worst fights you'll ever see. If you really like watching bad fights, I don't know why you would want to, but go back and watch that fight. And he gets scorched by Nikita Krylov. Has the no contest against Darren Stewart. They run that one back. He beats Darren Stewart, but not a very impressive fight, and then loses to a guy no one's ever heard of in Alexander Rashik. Okay? And then Gian Villante. The reason I got so down, I was high in Villante. And this is going back to who did he beat? He fought going back to his win in Corey Anderson in April 2015. That's where I was really high on Gian Villante. He had he had a couple losses to Maldonado and Oven St. Preux, but had some wins there. So they beat some tough guys, and really since that win and what was a great fight and knockout win for him against Corey Anderson, he's been mediocre. I mean, he really has. He's been the definition of mediocre. He gets knocked out against Tom Lawler, beats old-ass Anthony Perosh, loses to Ilir Latifi, beats some dude on short notice we've never heard of that's a middleweight, in Sarbek Sararov. Then a fight he should have won, and Mauricio Shogun Rua gets knocked out. Then another fight he probably should have won, in Patrick Cummings, loses. Split decision. And the sad thing is, because this division is so weak, a win puts either of these guys somewhat in a relevant discussion to fight elite talent. That's what's sad. Both these guys are just super mediocre right now. And I don't know. It's hard to know what to expect. I think Vellante should win. That's giving away my pick, I guess. But I'm not. I don't think this is as his makings of being either a really crappy fight or really boring. There is no in between with this one. There's not like, well, that was pretty good. It's not going to happen. I don't know. I don't know. Maybe this Meteor will push these two guys to perform. But as of right now, I really haven't seen it from either of these guys as of late. Both have had some up moments, but most of their moments have been down. So I don't know. It's a really hard matchup to pick because I don't know what guy is going to show up on any night. Is it going to be the Jean Vellante that fought Corey Anderson, or is it the Jean Vellante who had a piss poor performance in his last two fights? Is it going to be the Francis Barbosa that got that? What did I say? He got that. Knockout. Had the win over Ryan Jimmo and Elvis Mustasas. And over Arnaldo Oliveira. Winning 3 of 4, or is it going to be the dude that loses to Alexander Rochus and gets scorched by Nikita Krylov? You know what I mean? Like, what guy's going to show up here? All right, co-main event of the evening: Daniel Cormier against Volkan Ozdemir, aka No Time. I was talking about earlier about that Kamaru Usman and Emil Meek fight. Taking on elite wrestlers for one camp, trying to train and do that, is a very hard thing to overcome. Maybe one of the hardest things to overcome in this sport when you're matched up against somebody like that. And for Volkan Ozdemir, a guy that, yes, does possess knockout power. The guy is a very dangerous striker. He's 15-1. He's scorched everybody that's put in front of him. The dude hasn't lost in 3 years, which was actually in Bellator. He's put away just about everybody he's faced, but he hasn't faced anybody like Daniel Cormier. And not only that, Daniel Cormier is a guy that, did he get knocked out against John Jones? Yeah, he did. Now, sure, that ended up being a no contest, but he still got knocked out. That still was a mental damage thing. Now, Daniel Cormier, even with that, I think can still take shots. I think he's a guy that has a very good chin. He took a lot of shots from Rumble Johnson. He took a couple hard hits even in his win, which he dominated against Anderson Silva. And obviously, even before that head kick, I thought took a couple shots against John Jones in the second match. So I think Cormier is going to be able to take those strikes, get on the inside, take Ozdemir down, and have his way with him. Now, sure, Ozdemir maybe can catch him kind of coming in, clip him in the back of the ear, kind of like he did against Misha Serkinov. That's certainly possible. It can happen, but will it happen? I really think that's his only chance of winning. I don't see him submitting Daniel Cormier off his back. I don't see that happening. I don't see him winning a decision against Daniel Cormier after 25 minutes. I really think that's his chance. He's just got to catch him clean, coming in. And other than that, I'm not sure if Ozdemir stands much of a chance against Daniel Cormier. Now, I get why they're doing this fight as opposed to Alexander Gustafsson. Gustafsson's got several shots. He's already got a shot, at Daniel Cormier, so I get giving it to a new contender. He's not undeserving of it or anything, but I just think stylistically, I don't think he has the skills to defeat Daniel Cormier. Let's get to the main event of the evening: Stipe Miocic against Francis Ngannou for the heavyweight championship of the world. Really, to me, what this boils down to is, will Stipe try to out-wrestle Francis Ngannou, and will he have success with it? Because standing up, Ngannou is definitely the more powerful striker. I don't think that's a question. Stipe is a very good striker. Okay? Really good boxer. He's definitely more technical than Francis Ngannou. Hits hard too, but maybe not quite as hard. The wrestling, obviously being a former wrestler at Cleveland State University, he's out-wrestled people before. I mean, look at his fight against Mark Hunt. Will Ngannou be able to stop that? And even if he does, can he do it for 25 minutes? Stipe is a guy that has done 25 minutes a couple of times. And he can do that all day. Ngannou's never been put in that position where he's had to really defend takedowns. Look at the guy he's fought. He's never really fought anyone that's really tried to take him down. And maybe I think it's either first or second fight against Curtis Blades, but that was a short notice fight, I think, for Curtis. So other than that, he really hasn't faced anyone, and obviously Curtis is not the level of Stipe Miocic. He's never really tried to have anyone take him down. And two, can he stop the takedown for 25 minutes and be able to land one of those big, powerful hands to Stipe? I don't know. That's really going to be the question, because if I was Stipe, I wouldn't stay in range at all with this guy. I wouldn't, because it's a matter of time before he lands one of those bombs. And while, yeah, you're a good striker too, yeah, maybe you can do it to him, but why risk it? Why risk it when you clearly are the better wrestler? And I would say Stipe maybe feels him out a little bit. Maybe tries to feel the range, the speed of what Stipe's going on, try to time, or what Ngannou's got going on, try to time that, and take this thing to the ground and try to outwork him. And then probably put him away in the third or fourth round with some strikes. That's what I think Stipe's strategy is going to be in Ngannou. He's got to be able to get his back off the cage, turn it, disengage, strike, repeat, rinse and repeat. That's what Ngannou has to do to be successful if he wants to become heavyweight champion of the world. All right. With that said, let's get to picks here for UFC 220, Thomas Almeida against Rob Font. I'm going to go with Thomas Almeida in this matchup. Like I said, I just think that he's the little better striker, and I just think has a little more power. Even though I like Rob Font, I'm going to go with Thomas Almeida in this one. Gian Villante against Francimar Barroso. As I said, I'm really kind of about this fight, but I'm going to go with Gian Villante. I think he's taken on better guys. I think he's had some better performances, and I think he's capable of better performances. I just never have really been impressed with Barroso, so I'm going to go with Gian Villante in this one. Shane Burgos against Calvin Kattar. Boy, this is a fight where both guys, I think, are extremely talented. Shane Burgos has obviously really rose to the occasion in his last few fights. I mean, he's a guy that I think is the next big thing at 145 pounds. He's won his last 3 fights. I mean, his dismantling of Charles Rosa, I think, was a thing of beauty. I thought he had an excellent performance against Godfredo Pepe. Obviously, really looked good, in his debut against Thiago Trotar, winning that unanimous decision. The dude's undefeated 10-0. I believe he's from the he trains with Tiger Schulman, so he's from New York, but obviously, I guess kind of the hometown guy there. And Calvin Kattar, he is from Boston, 17-2. I think he's a guy to look out for. Obviously, he came in to the UFC on short notice against Andre Fili and dominated a good fighter in Andre Fili with some really good stand-up skills. And he's beaten some solid competitors, in his career, leading up to this fight. And I'm excited for this one. I think this is a really good fight. This is a fight that probably could have happened on the regional scene there, in the Northeast in New England. We get to see it here in the UFC. I think both guys are super similar. The only difference I maybe see, I think Burgos has hits maybe a little harder than Kattar. Kattar is probably a little better counter striker, throws a little more kicks. So I think stylistically, it's very similar. But I'm going to go with Shane Burgos in this one. I think that's going to be an incredible fight. That, speaking of stealing the show, I think I talked about what fight could steal the show for Bellator. I think this is the fight that could steal the show here for UFC 220. Shane Burgos against Calvin Kattar. I'm very excited. Both these guys are extremely talented individuals. I wouldn't be surprised if they fight each other again sometimes in their career. They're meeting now. Definitely 2 great prospects in the division, and I think one of these guys, one or both, could be fighting for a championship sometime as their career. I really think they could develop into that type of fighter. But I'm going to take Shane Burgos in this one. I'm going to go with Daniel Cormier, obviously, against Volkan Ozdemir. And then in the main event, I'm going to go with Stipe Miocic. I just think that his wrestling is too much of an edge and is too much of a big skill set to really overlook that. and really overlooked picking him against Ngannou. So I'm going to go with Stipe Miocic to not only maintain his title, but set the UFC record for 3 consecutive heavyweight title defenses, and that puts him in rarefied air and puts him in discussion of being the greatest UFC heavyweight of all time. So, all right, I'd like to thank everybody for watching this week, and thanks for sticking along with just me and listen to me drone on for an hour or so here about all these fights. So hope everybody enjoyed it. So I'll be back next week. Hopefully Kayla will be able to rejoin me. Again, she was covering Bellator this week, so she'll have a full report of what went on there at the Fabulous Forum in Los Angeles, where obviously we'll talk about UFC 220 as well. So thanks to everybody for watching on MMA World and MMA UK, and again, follow me on Twitter at Jim Graham to see what I'm doing and obviously see what I'm saying during the fights this weekend. So thank everybody for tuning in. I'll see you next week, and this has been Beyond the Cage right here on MMA World and MMA UK. Bye, everybody.